Well, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome or welcome back, as the case might be. My name is Dalibor Petrovic. I'm your host of these tectonic conversations. And today I have a real special guest, Lars Tvede. A greetings, Lars. Thank you very much for your time. Welcome to the conversation.
It's a pleasure.
Lars is a technologist, entrepreneur, a successful business leader, and an author that sold over 1 million books so far. And today we're going to talk about your latest book called Hyperintelligence. We are recording this on September 1st, 2025, and this book is about to go live. It's about to be published by Wiley. I understand as of next week it will be available both in English and in Chinese. And the Hyperintelligence, the book itself, is a fascinating journey through the history of the universe, a cosmic journey of intelligence from the Big Bang through today, but then all the way into the far tomorrow. So, Lars, thank you very much for your time. I would like to start by actually asking you if you can sort of introduce yourself to our audiences and tell us what compelled you to write or co-author the book on hyperintelligence.
Yeah, so first about myself, I'm an engineer and economist. I've started 13 companies, written 17 books. The women have left me because I've written too many books. It takes time. But that's not all the time. So and investor, and I'm a Danish national. I live in Switzerland, so this Cosmos here is fake. I'm actually in Switzerland right now.
Excellent.
And you see a name up here. That is one of the companies.
Supertrends.
Yeah,
Yes.
Supertrends is one of the company I founded, which uses agentic AI to predict global science and innovation, and which has also mapped it back 3.3 million years back. There was no science that far back, but there was actually innovation by pre-humans. So that's a bit of my background. So some of the books I've written have been about the future. There are two different books called Supertrends. It's a bit confusing because they had the same main title, but they were different. And one called From Malthus to Mars. And then I worked with a gentleman called Daniel Käfer,
Mhm.
who has worked for Meta, and he has an AI consulting company, and is also a music publisher. And he said, Lars, shouldn't we write a book about the future? How AI is especially will change the future. And I was like, I don't know. I've kind of written three books already about the future. It will be a little bit just an update of what I've done before, even though it's very interesting and it's very dramatic and so on. So I was kind of not really answering him. And then I have this hilarious friend in Denmark called Henrik Radik. He's a former Navy SEAL, and he runs a management training company. And then he calls me up and said, Lars, I've got a friend that I'm training. And so Jakob Bock Axelsen is from Deloitte, um, which, by the way, you are also. So maybe you'll just tell me what you've been doing in Deloitte.
Yes, so I spent 2 decades with the firm, with Deloitte, both in technology strategy. I was a partner in Canada, leading our technology strategy practice, and then um, globally led our executive program for technology leaders before I took early retirement late last year in order to lean in fully into this new opportunity that AI and automation is presenting us all. So, as part of this process, I'm, of course, extremely curious about the developments around AI automation, what the future holds, and how are we going to come together to navigate this transition from today's
Good.
world of scarcity into tomorrow's world of abundance. So that's sort of who I am, and why I'm doing these conversations is to bring people like you and others who have interesting, smart, well-researched, well-supported perspectives that actually add to the conversation. So thank you very much for the opportunity to introduce myself, Lars, as well.
Yeah, Deloitte. So this Jakob Bock Axelsen, um, Henrik told me you have to look him up. So he has five academic degrees. So he's a physicist, a biophysicist, a mathematician, an economist, and philosopher.
Oh my
So
God.
so so I came to this dinner, and then Henrik, the Navy SEALs, he just introduced us to each other, and we're just sitting there drinking a fair amount of wine and just talking about blah 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 about everything, the universe, cosmos, AI. So he was sitting on the AI team and the international quantum computing team. So
Mhm.
really interesting subjects, and we were like talking about everything. And I left the dinner completely excited. I go back to Switzerland, and then I have mentioned to him this book that I didn't want to write. And then I get this message from Jakob where he just write, "You should call your book The Cosmic Evolution of Genius."
Mm.
And then I think that's a cool title, but what does he actually mean? So I called him up and said, "What do you mean?" And then he said, "The story about what AI will do in the future is only a part of a much bigger story about how complexity and intelligence evolves in general and has evolved since the beginning of the Big Bang, the beginning of
Yes.
the known universe." So that's 13.8 billion years ago. So
Yeah.
we talk about that. And then I called Daniel, and then I said, can we increase the scope a little bit so we talk about the cosmos and everything? And he said, "Oh, that sounds exciting." So that's how it came to be. So the book is here, and so you have Daniel, the ex-Meta AI consultant. You have me, and then you have Jakob, five
Jakob.
different degrees and so on. So we co-authored this, and it became for me very exciting. So I like to write books where I don't know all the answers when I begin writing, and so I learn in the process. And I actually also think that it's easier to describe things well just after you've learned them. So
That's
because once
absolutely
it's
true.
surprised to you, yeah, you you can convey your amazement without being over technical.
Yes.
So the book is divided into four different parts. The first one. Um, Starts like this. It's called the Cosmosphere. And
Cosmosphere.
this, yeah, and that this is about how complexity evolved in cosmos. And then the second part is the biosphere. So much more elaborate complexity
Yes.
and the beginning of intelligence in biological life. And then the third one is the technosphere, which describes the very unique combination of events that set humans on a
Yes.
journey that no other species have done. And then the last is going into the future, and we call that a Unisphere because technology will bridge all these different things, the cosmos and the biosphere and the technology,
Yes.
and create a world which will be amazing, and in the longer term, completely psychedelic, I think.
Completely psychedelic.
Yeah,
I love it.
yeah,
So, the way we're going to construct this particular conversation is we're going to start by unpacking the book itself. In the
right.
book, along these four chapters, you are presenting 10 specific moments in history that got us to where we are at. And I would invite you to sort of describe those to our audiences. So that'll be sort of the next part. Then we're going to talk about, from the technology perspective, first and foremost, what do you foresee the next 5 years would be like? And then we're going to
Yeah,
take a peek at what is likely 25 years out.
yeah,
And then the last part of this conversation will come back to talk about the implications for people, organizations, and societies today. What are some of the things that, what are the opportunities that this presents to us? What might be some concerns? What should be some interventions? So that's how we're going to construct the remainder of this conversation. So we'll unpack the book. We'll talk about the near and midterm technology future, and then we'll talk about the implications afterwards. Right?
yeah. So I think I'd like to just explain the general structure of the book, uh, which was not clear when we started. But what we found was that there are some phenomena in the universe that repeats themselves again and again. So you have something that reaches a critical density, and then once that happens, you get some new dynamics, and then that can create complexity if you get the possibility of recombining.
Hmm.
We call that a complexity cascade.
Yes.
But especially the first complexity cascades, each of them could only get so far in
Hmm.
terms of making new complexity. Then they couldn't get further until there was a critical density somewhere of something, and then it released a new cascade. So
Yes.
we had the scaling barrier where complexity grows but then it peaks and doesn't get further. Something happens, you have new cascades and new cascades,
Yes.
but it changes nature over time. So I'll just go through the cascades and then we can dig into the specifics of what we looked at. So the
Sure.
first one is subatomic particles, and we're talking about within the first second
One
of
second.
the Big Bang, where first you had only energy and then energy converted to mass to some degree, but there was no structure at all.
Yes.
And there we say we have this example that keeps coming back in the book. We imagine a woman called Maria who's on holiday in
In
Croatia.
Croatia, of all
Yeah,
places.
of all places, beautiful. And she's standing there and she's enjoying, she's admiring a beautiful morning. But then we go through that the landscape is formed by DNA and how complex she is as a being. And then we take it back to how did all this complexity evolve from a soup of subatomic
Yeah.
particles or even just a field of energy. So we get within the first second, we get from that to the formation of the first atoms, which are hydrogen and helium. And then with the stars, we get the formation of more atoms, so we get the whole periodic system, the periodic table of atoms. But they can only combine a limited number of ways without the presence of life. But then you get living cells, then you get organelles and multicellular life, and then you get what you call the biogeochemical transformation. That is, the Earth completely changes the way it looks, the climate, everything is changed by DNA. And then you get to consciousness and explorative intelligence, and then you get to technology, and then you get to computers and telecommunications. We think it's a very extreme, special kind of technology. Then you get agentic AI or artificial swarm intelligence, and then you get to hyperintelligence. So these are the steps that the book goes through. But if we just roll back to the Big Bang, um, so we speculate, of course, why it happened. And it was so interesting that we looked at different explanations out there. So it's one of the things that science doesn't know. And with different religions have explanations for it, but many of them, if you kind of really think about it logically, you run into some annoying problems. For instance, there's something called infinite regress. So if you say God created the universe, then some annoying person will say, "Who created God?" Well, God lives, beyond the time and space. Okay, so how can you live beyond time and space but impact? So it at least becomes a little bit fluffy. And then there are different scientific explanations. There are, the explanations. Well, it's not explanations of why the Big Bang happened so much. It's descriptions of what is happening at a basic level in the universe. So some say that we have a multiverse, we have many different universes. Some say that the universe will eventually collapse and there
Mhm.
will be a huge, humongous black hole and it will explode again. Some say that all mass will disappear, at which point space-time loses relevance, and then you can
Yeah.
have a new Big Bang in that situation. The one we actually then got quite interested in was one that gained support while we were writing the book. So there was this observation this year that if you look at the spin from our vantage point of galaxies, way too many spin the same way. So
Mm.
the probability of this being entirely random is less than 0.01%. So you can ask yourself, why would that be? And there's one explanation that would make it feasible, and that is that the universe comes from the inside of a Big Bang. So
Mm.
inside of Big Bang, you have critical density of mass, of course,
Yep.
which is very, very high, and that this can trigger formation of new time space. But big holes are they're spinning extremely quickly. And so it could be that some of this spin gets picked up by the galaxies. There's
Mm.
no proof for that, but it could very well be that AI will tell us what the truth
Yeah.
is within the next 10 or 15 years or whatever. So yeah, so we look at that, and then we decide to use the term called tokens to describe
Yes.
complexity. And we try to measure it actually in quite some detail throughout the book, how many different kinds of tokens there are. So when you have only helium and
Hydrogen.
hydrogen, yeah, these can be described by a few simple specifications. So it's like 25 for each or so. So it's super, super simple and intellectually quite boring at this point. Once you get the formation of stars, they have critical density of hydrogen that turns into more helium. But then, especially when stars explode or stars collide,
Yeah.
the forces are so massive that they create very, very heavy atoms. And for instance, so no, typically inside a star, you can create up to iron. But when you have an explosion or a collision, they can make uranium, platinum, gold.
Yeah.
For demonstration purposes, I actually have a gold watch on. So the gold here has been inside a star. The hydrogen inside me and there's quite a lot of hydrogen inside me and you.
Yeah.
That hydrogen was created within the first second of the history of the universe.
Yeah.
But everything else inside us has been created by stars, which is kind of interesting to think about. So, then I had this interesting experience very early on when we were writing the book. So I go to GPT and I say, we're going to write a book about the history of complexity and intelligence in the universe. We're going to divide it into phases. Can you please suggest which phases we should
Yeah.
divide it? And then it makes a distinction which is pretty close to what we ended up using. But once it's described this distinction, it says you should just pay attention to the fact that there are two kinds of outcomes. First of all, there's complexity that create a finite outcome, and then there's a complexity that create an outcome which can by itself evolve new complexity.
Right.
So the first thing is a token, like in AI we talk about a word or a sign. In a book is a token. But the other ones are living tokens. So a piece of software is a living token.
Hmm.
And it kind of blew me away that it told me this, even though I didn't ask for it at all. And that was one of the many moments I've had recently where I thought it's beginning to smell of hyperintelligence
Yeah. Yeah.
sometimes because it takes initiative and it shows some wisdom and a deeper insight that you don't have yourself. So So in that section, we go in and describe how complexity evolves, and we go through chaos theory and math. Math, by the way, I think there's widespread agreement that math is not created but discovered. And if we have a multiverse and we have many different universes, maybe the laws of physics will be different, but math will probably be the
Constant.
same.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and if there's intelligence elsewhere in the universe, they will also discover the same math. But then we get to this story which is the transition between what you can call simple tokens and living tokens um, or thinking tokens. And it's a story about the infinite monkey, and it was one I ran into completely randomly. So they have been just speculating that if our entire universe consisted of monkeys that are typing on typewriters, that eventually one of them would randomly type Hamlet by Shakespeare.
Mm.
But then other scientists have actually they've tried to measure the probability of that. And so the probability of even a monkey typing banana, the word banana, is almost infinitely small.
Mm.
If you take the probabilities and add them up, you would need an almost infinite number of universes, parallel universes, existing many, many orders of magnitude longer than our
Then,
universe. And then, of course, we get to, but Shakespeare did exist, and he wrote this, and he wrote many other pieces, and they were all fantastic. So there's a big difference between writing an outcome and writing code, because code has its own life, and it can find its way to brilliant outcomes.
yes.
So that sort of sets us into the biosphere
Hmm.
and the origin of life. And there is now, wasn't like that, I would say 20, 30 years ago, but there is now a big consensus among people who research the original life that it must have come from thermal vents. So thermal vents are
Thermal, yeah.
these, yeah, at the bottom of the sea, where you have superheated water coming up, it's close to the very hot lava underground, and it comes up and it brings minerals, so it forms a natural chimney. They
Hmm.
can be maybe 10 meters or 30 feet high, or they can be
Yeah.
smaller. And so these have been studied. So they have an electric field because of chemical differences, so differences in the pH value. And so they're like a battery. So there's an energy source apart from the heat, very useful electric proton stream. There's also everything you need in order to create the right molecules. There are also bubbles.
Yeah.
And and so when you have bubbles underwater, they're called micelles. Then they can capture different chemical soups, and there you can easily see bubbles capturing ribosomes.
Yes.
So ribosomes, how do you say
Yeah.
that in
Ribosomes. Yeah.
ribosomes?
Ribosomes.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. So ribosomes are kind of precursors for DNA and RNA. So they can replicate, they can create other they can make snippets of proteins. And so if you have a bubble, and sometimes bubble have it's two bubbles within each other, so a double membrane bubble there, and you have the energy source, and you have all the right chemical ingredients, and you have a long time, then you can get to the very first cell. Um, and then from there on, there's a very valid description of what goes on. So apparently, the jump from a single cell to multi-cell is very, very hard. It
Yes.
takes a very, very long time. At least it took a very, very long time on Earth. But then we run into a mystery, and that is that the single cell life emerged much too early. So we go into what is a minimal viable product that can make a living cell, which we can call life. And we know that on average, the useful complexity of DNA in life is evolving exponentially, and there's so sort of fairly predictable how the most complex, how long time it takes to move forward. So if we roll that back, then we need more than 9 billion years to get to the first cell.
Mm.
But the Earth is only 4.6 billion years old.
Hmm.
So this doesn't prove anything, but it indicates that we are all aliens, which means that the first cells arrived on Earth from somewhere else.
Mm.
For surely the which have oceans and lakes, which have thermal vents, so these cells could appear anywhere. And we also increasingly, in these years, with very, very good space observations, find more and more indications of building blocks for life, I would
Hmm.
say.
Hmm.
And we may very well find something that indicates almost proof of life. For instance, oxygen in an atmosphere is almost certainly a proof of life, or methane.
Yeah.
So anyway, so we go through this, and then at some point, we have the formation of nerve cells. So that's the first telecommunication.
Yeah.
Um, and we explain how, for instance, an eye might evolve from a little cavity in the skin, and then genetically there's just over a very, very long time selectionless selection, and you get to the eye and so on. And then at some point, one species out of all of them, so there are probably more than 8 million different species apart from bacteria and viruses.
Mm-hmm.
So one started becoming really intelligent and developing technology, and that was us and well, humans. Um, so we look into why did that happen, and we conclude that it's a combination of three different things that set us apart. The first of all was that we gained control of fire. So
Mm-hmm.
there are in nature there are some very very few examples of animals deliberately to some degree controlling fire. There's some indications that birds on purpose set forest on fire, so they grab something that's burning a little bit and fly and drop it. We don't know for sure, but completely different what humans did. And we don't know for sure when it happened, but because there are some early indications that go several millions years back, but they are not like definitive proof. But it looks like somebody were making clay here, for instance, and burning it. So making some kind of terracotta with
Right.
fire. So that gave us an energy source. And one thing we know about technology, which is very, very present right now with AI, is that progress in technology needs energy.
Correct.
It really does. And it's very, very tied to energy. And there are no rich nations today which do not have access to enormous amounts of energy.
Correct. Yeah.
So we got access to that, highly scalable, sometimes too scalable, but and we were lucky because oxygen concentration in the atmosphere is such that fires can burn, but they don't, you can normally control them if you
Control them.
try
Yeah.
to.
Yeah. Yeah.
The second thing was formation of language, our ability to express ourselves, and there are actually some genetic and also indications from the formation of the throat and so on that indicate roughly when that was. And it turns out that it seems to happen more or less simultaneously with the third one, which is the beginning of trade.
Mm.
So trade is so unique. So of course, in the animal kingdom and in the ecosystem, there are exchanges. We
Yep.
plants make oxygen, and animals make carbon dioxide, and they
Yeah.
exchange that. Lots of this, but there's no example at all of two animals, for instance, that say, "I've got this thing that you've never heard of. What have you got?" And well, I've got that.
And
So
then
on.
exchange.
Yeah.
Yeah. Trading. Yeah.
So we have fairly good indications of where and when this happened, and that meant that when we are trading things, we started combining, and that set us on this combinatorial cascade with ideas and with products. But it also has some social effects because it became useful to be cooperative. So it also set us on a journey where win-lose transactions increasingly were replaced by win-win transactions.
Yeah.
So the combination of these three developments, which I think it was the control of fire that sort of enabled our mental progress
Yeah.
to the next. That started then the development of the Technosphere. And we then go into the Technosphere, and it's just, I mean, it's very, very interesting. I love this. And
Very nice.
as I said, our company Supertrends maps these things. We have mapped 16,000 historical innovations over the last 3.3 million years, and I've actually read all of them. It's a little bit dry sometimes, but it's also interesting because you see how one thing leads to
Least.
another. And it's Agentic AI that maps it for us, so it finds all the connections, how everything is based on something before it and
Yeah.
enables something new behind it. So we then, of course, come to the computing and telecommunication,
That's right.
where at one point we look at the very first telecommunication, which was in China with smoke signals, and we try to estimate the bandwidth and so on. And then we run the numbers up to where we are today. So it's certainly been accelerating a lot. And then inside that story comes this conference in 1956, where people for the first time talk about artificial intelligence, and it becomes a thing.
Yeah.
And then we track how the different attempts to develop this. As we both know, there were these AI winters where it was super bad to be in AI.
Yep.
But then there was a new breakthrough and it became a little bit hot, but then they kind of stopped again. But it really took off with GPT, I would say 2.5.
Yeah.
At least that was what blew me away. And now it's absolutely exploding. So that takes us into the Unisphere, where we from we have in Supertrends, we have 4,000 predictions for future technology breakthrough, and we have a system to rate them by importance. So what we did was we just took all the ones that were rated 9 or 10
Yeah.
on a scale 1 to 10, looked at them and said, which world is this painting a picture of? And this is the story of the future. So of course, we, in the book, I mean, it's not a very fat book, So I have I have another book here. This is about business cycles. Is even much better. So we look at what are the really dramatic things that will change life and the world and so on.
Yeah.
By the way, I kind of forgot something when we talk about the biosphere, and that is the way DNA terraformed Earth. So we had this imaginary woman, Maria, in Croatia, and she's standing there. And so then we go through, she's looking out at the sea with the blue
Mhm.
water and the blue sky. It's blue because of oxygen. There's oxygen because of plants. There are plants because of DNA.
Yeah.
At the beach, as she's looking down, you have these grains of sand, which is wine. So this is from chalk. So
Hmm.
this is sea animals, which also were created by DNA. You have coral reefs, which are made by DNA. You had original. You had a lot of, we still have a lot of basalt, but a lot of this was converted into granite, which is lighter. It's very heavy
Yeah.
still, but it's lighter. That created some turmoil in the ground and so on. Um, you have all the colors she sees. So if you want to know what a planet looked like without DNA, look at Mars.
Yeah.
So it's pretty, it's red and brown pretty much.
Yeah.
So virtually every color you see, except red, brown, and white when it's snow, are made by DNA, enabled by DNA.
Hmm.
So that's an example about how software, so code in this case, biological code can completely change a planet.
Yeah.
And it's kind of an inspiration for thinking AI is also code, and it will, to a massive degree, also change our planet and have cosmic implications as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that the sky and the sea will not be blue. I think a lot of wonderful things will stay the same, but a lot of other things will become completely different because of this. So one thing I think sometimes is useful, instead of thinking incrementally forward, is to kind of jump forward and then think backwards and say
Backwards. Yeah. 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 Yeah.
yeah, how will we get to there? Also because as many technologies that we know about or can imagine are very much work in progress. But if you go into the future and imagine they exist and they work, how will that be? And
Yeah.
then we look
Work
backwards.
backwards. Yeah.
Yeah.
So this
So
was fantastic. So you have just now described essentially a quick story of how we got here, all the way
yeah,
back to the Big Bang 13.8 billion years ago. And
yeah,
you captured it in effectively nine breakthrough moments,
Yeah.
right? 9 breakthroughs that allowed further cascade of development. So
Nine
now,
singularities, I would also say.
I'm sorry, 9 singularities.
Yeah, nine singularities.
Yeah. What is a fascinating? So two things that I took away as very fascinating aha moments for me is when you describe the complexity of DNA and you work it backwards to say, look, the complexity of this.
Yeah,
If we just take the graph
yeah.
and
We are too
chart,
complex.
yeah, chart the complexity backwards,
Yeah,
where it actually intersects is about 9 billion years ago,
yeah, yeah,
and Earth is only 4.5, of which the
yeah,
first billion it was molten. So three
yeah.
and a half billion years of potential life on Earth. But your math suggests this complexity would have had to come from somewhere else, right? That's a very interesting perspective. And I can,
Yeah, for
I
me,
can,
I just want to say, for me, it's very high conviction because I think it must be far more complex to make the first living cell than to get from there to multicellular life.
yeah,
But yet, we had these first cells super early, and then it took a long time to get to multicellular life. So
yeah.
I have fairly high conviction that life on Earth did not originate here.
Yeah, yeah. So that is the first for me, very interesting aha moment that I had when I read that. And then this second concept is also, I think, very powerful. That essentially it was DNA that terraformed the Earth. It was
Yeah.
DNA that created the environment around us, which is
It
very,
also cooled
very
Earth. Yeah, it cooled down the climate something like 50 degrees.
yeah. Yeah, yeah. So this was fantastic. And by the way, the book is full of stats, research. Of course, you're pointing back to the from biologists, historians, physicists, chemists. Like it's actually a very superbly well researched book. But now we got us to this point, to 2025. And
Mhm.
in your book, I think that you're marking this 2025 as essentially the beginning of the Unisphere moment,
Yeah.
right? So, what I would love to ask you, um, what's the next 5 years like? What's the next 25 years like? And then we can come back to it and talk about implications.
Yeah, can I take them in reverse order? I'd like to say what I think the world would be like in 2050 and
Please.
then
Yeah.
take 2030 first. So we can start. So as I said earlier, that the really pivotal moment for the human race was control of fire. So energy is very, very important. And right now we're struggling with an energy
Yeah.
transition that's not really working
Yeah.
because there's no transition. We're just adding new forms of energy, but we're not really successful at scaling back anything that we have so far. So I think that nuclear fusion power will be working.
Mhm.
And if you listen to many of the top venture capital investors in Silicon Valley and tech gurus also, um, at, at this, many of them express that there are two really, really hot technologies in the coming decades. One of them is obviously AI, but the other one is literally very hot, and that is nuclear fusion power,
Mhm.
which is a replication of what happens in the sun. So as an engineering task, it's very, very complex, but we have mapped it back from when the very first experiments were done in the late 1950s. And although if you make a graph of all the different experiments and how they have progressed and the yield, it looks a bit messy, but there's a Moore's law for it, and it's actually a bit faster than the Moore's law for chips. So you have this constant doubling, and it's improved far more than a million times. And if you roll that forward, we should be 3 to 4 years from the time where it works. So there are about 45 different experimental reactors that are, quite serious. Fortunately, they use many different approaches. Many of them indicate that within the next 15 years they'll go online.
Mhm.
And 2050 is 25 years from
Yeah,
now.
that's right.
There's one outlier, and that's Helion. So Helion, the chairman of Helion is Sam Altman, who is also the founder and CEO of OpenAI, so
Yep.
our GPT. So, and he was leading Y Combinator, the best accelerator in the world before. So he knows something about technology, and if he says something is going to happen, you kind of have to listen a little bit,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think.
yeah. That's fair.
So they say that, well, there's 2 years ago they announced that they signed a contract with Microsoft to deliver power from nuclear fusion in 2028. And when I saw that, I was like, I know people from the industry, both from research and also people who are working on it. They have completely different timelines. I don't know. But they're actually building the factory, and they still say 3 years from now they will deliver it. So this is interesting. By the way, there's a little aside, but there's another another project. Somebody figured out they can make gold with a nuclear fusion
Yeah,
reactor as a
yeah.
side project,
Yeah,
5 tons a year.
yeah.
You've seen this?
Yep, I have. Yep.
Yeah.
So Lars,
Yeah.
what
So I think
what you
we will. I mean, there are other dramatic technologies. There are thorium, small modular thorium reactors. China has one in the Gobi Desert. We are not hearing much about it, but this is very safe, very scalable. So it maybe can be a very interesting interim technology. Um, and so I think nuclear will be really, really amazing, and solar is getting better and better. So
Yep.
I think we're moving towards addressing this whole energy issue by then. But of course, we will need a lot of power before that, and I think a lot of it will be gas turbines
Yeah.
to be realistic.
Yes.
So I think by 2050 we are looking into a very clean future where we have unlimited energy.
Yeah.
So I, there are some people they describe, civilizations in the universe by how much energy they use, and
Okay.
there's something called a Dyson sphere where you surround a whole star with solar panels. I don't think that it makes any sense to go that far, but I think that energy will not really be a constraint in the second part of this century.
Hmm.
Then health, I think, is also interesting. So you have a term called lifespan, and you have one called health span, and
Yeah.
you want these two to be as similar as you can. So let's say if you live to 80, you would like to be healthy until you drop dead. Um, so there's because of AI in particular, there's dramatic acceleration in the discovery processes in life sciences and in
Yeah.
pharma. So it's certainly a reasonable assumption that the time to launch a new medication can be cut in half, and the cost can be cut in half. And in the book, we actually operate with some numbers that indicate that the cost can perhaps be cut by a lot more than half
Yeah.
because of AI. So you can simulate how proteins fold several million times faster than you did it just 5 years ago with AI. And you can first, we had AlphaFold that could simulate one protein at a time, but really, really quickly. But now you have software that also look at all the different combinations of proteins and how they all will interact with each other. And then soon we can simulate quite well whole cells and so on. So you have three different ways to find out what will happen in biology. So you have in vivo, so
Yep.
with
In
live,
vivo, yeah. Live. Yeah.
in vivo experiment on human, for instance, is very, very expensive and a little bit risky. Then you have in vitro, so that
Yeah.
is like in the cells in
In a
a
dish.
petri
Yeah.
dish, for instance. But then you have in silico where you simulate it. So in just in
Computationally, right? That's
yeah,
a in silico will
computational,
be computational
yeah.
simulation. Yeah.
Yeah, so uh, more and more moves over to that where the marginal cost is almost nothing and the speed is millions of
Yeah.
times faster. So I think that by 2050 there will be a broad expectation that lifespans perhaps many people that are born at that time will be able to live perhaps 150 years and be really healthy and vigor until they're
Yeah.
120 or 130 and so on.
This
And
is this is
also it would be
so Lars, this is interesting because I know that Ray Kurzweil um, has introduced this concept of the lifespan escape velocity.
escape. Yeah, it wasn't actually him who introduced it. It was De Grey who introduced the term, but Ray Kurzweil he talks a lot
Oh,
about it.
Yeah, he
Yeah,
does. Oh, that's fair. I thought it was raised. I stand corrected. That's a fascinating, actually, but quite logical outcome, right? Of what could likely happen with medicine and research.
yeah. So just let's just take what the idea is. So the idea is that scientific progress will be going so fast that for every year you get older, you gain a year because of new technology. So you
Correct.
actually never die.
Yeah.
So our hunch is that you will actually die, but you can delay it more and more. And we
Yes.
actually run an example in the book, and we also look at different um, famous people working in the industry and predicting the industry when they think we might reach this escape velocity for longevity. Longevity escape velocity is the term.
Longevity, correct.
Yeah.
Longevity. Yeah.
But we go into the specific technologies, and you can first of all, for instance, you can take a blood sample, and you can already now scan for indications, very early indications of a number of different cancers, also autoimmune processes and so on. But we're getting cancer vaccines.
Yeah.
The first ones are actually out. We will get reverse vaccines. So you have a big group of diseases, some of them which are mortal, which are autoimmune, where the body attacks itself.
Hmm.
From diabetes 2 to some that are much more aggressive, and we'll probably be able to vaccinate against that, and so on and so forth. So people will think different if they expect to live much longer.
Of course.
But we can get back to how that will impact, our thinking about life and so on. But then, of course, I talked about energy and I talked about health, but what about AI itself?
Yeah.
And by 2050, I believe that we're deep, deep into hyperintelligence. And I think that so-called the reasoners, these are the AI models that were launched, for instance, by OpenAI AI in late last year. You had O1, O3, that works a bit like an academic. So they have a
Yeah.
chain of thought.
Yeah.
Sometimes they go in a direction, find out it doesn't work, try something else.
Hmm.
Work very systematically, deliver the result in a kind of scaffold and structured way, and so on. And this works now. I mean, when I use Grok and Gemini and GPT, I see this working very well. But there are different tests to see how long can they do this on their own. So, especially within software development, can you tell it to develop some software to solve a task, and then it just goes on and on and on? Or does it stop after a while, and then you have to come and say, "What have you done so far? I think you should do this." So this is going a little bit hyper exponential.
Mm.
So maybe it's 20 minutes that you can achieve now, but by the way, in 20 minutes they can do 2 years, man years of
Yeah.
work. So
Yeah.
it's quite substantial. But we are not many years or even quarters from it being able to do a lifetime of work autonomously.
Yeah.
And then, so there's a term for this. So these reasoners that can work completely autonomously are sometimes be called innovators. You can also say it's self-contained or self-directed reasoners. So
Yeah.
I think that we'll have them in 2028. So you can create whole organizations that are very, very complex and evolve spontaneously by themselves with AI. A third thing is robots, and robots will obviously be very visible in the landscape and in the job market and so on. So there are many different predictions for how many we'll have smart robots, because we've already got robots. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
cars have for a long time been made by robots. So we're talking about smart, versatile robots that in many cases have human level or way beyond human level intelligence, at least in some aspect. So ask Elon Musk, and it's gazillions, but ask Citibank, who are not Elon Musk, and they say it's 4.1 billion. So that's autonomous cars that you really can let loose. They drive by themselves to wherever you want them to go without anybody in them. But it's also smart robots, many of them humanoid. Others might look like all kinds of insects and so on, but very,
Yeah.
very brainy and competent. So So what is the perspective of having 4 billion robots at that time if we choose Citibank's number? Well, so first of all, we can say how big is the human workforce at that time? And it's probably around, 3.5 to 4 billion. Because humans don't, we don't work that much of our life. We are children and then we're retired and so on. And by the way, humans on average only work 8% of their life. 8%. That's you contribute to GDP 8% of your life on average.
How,
In
how do you
China, I think it's 10, but
how do you come to that calculation? That's an interesting number that you mentioned.
well, first we assume that you on average joined the work market when you're 22 full time,
Hmm.
and then you retire when you're what 66 or so.
Yeah.
But every day you sleep and you have free time and you have weekends and you have holidays and you're ill, so on. So if we calculate that, we get to about 8%.
Oh, okay. Okay. Makes
Yeah.
sense.
So the reason I say in China is 10% is I work with Chinese and they seem to work a
A lot.
lot.
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe because Silicon Valley is also, but okay, so these robots, they can, at least in principle, work pretty close to 100% of the time.
Yeah.
So if we say, just for simplicity, we say there's the same amount of smart robots as there are working people, but but the robots, they can work 24/7 if we want them to. We
Yeah.
can organize it so that they do that. I would say it's conceivable that 80% of all work is done by smart robots.
Yeah.
So humans will be clearly in the minority. And that means that we'll have a situation where also the labor markets there will be like three clouds. We know the term cloud computing. So we can talk about the human cloud, humans available on request. That's the gig economy, exists already,
Mhm.
99 designs and so on. But then you'll have a cloud of robots on demand, and you'll have AI agents and other AI models on demand. And then if you're running a company, you can just say, or you have a task privately, you want to make a garden party or whatever. You can just say, I want this problem solved. Here's a specification of a problem. Give me bits. And then you can have robots and AI models and people perhaps bidding for exactly the same. I think more likely robots and people will bid more in competition with each other, and then AI for some pure intellectual task. Um, and you may even say, I prefer a robot for this, or I prefer a
Or a
human for
human.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so very, very different job market where the the GDP as we normally measure it is to a large degree done by self-contained smart machines
Yeah.
25 years from now.
Yeah. So you're detaching GDP from human labor. It's th those two are no longer connected in the way they
Yes,
have been historically, right?
yeah. So you and I have something in common because you have interviewed David Shapiro,
Yeah.
who I think is very good talking about this, and I listen to his podcast. But I have a podcast with my co-author Daniel Kafer, and
Okay.
he
Yeah.
did two interviews with David Shapiro.
That's right.
He talks about the post-labor economy and how you separate the GDP from labor, which is
Yeah.
not a complete separation, but there's clearly an issue to address when you can say the social contract has been that you work and then you get rewarded for your work. Yeah, kind of multiplied by your risk taking and maybe your special talent. To where you say most of the value in society that we measure at least is not created by any people. So where where does that value end? And it's of course it's a very very old discussion about capitalism. I think we have a lot of the answers already, but there are some things that will become so extreme that we will have to rethink them.
So let's maybe now zoom into the next 5 years.
Yeah, the next 5 years. Yeah.
I'm
So
curious. Yeah. What,
yeah,
what do you think is going to happen in the next 5 years? What do you think is going to happen to the economy, opportunity for people, risks, and maybe some
yeah.
ideas on interventions?
Yeah, so with the next 5 years is, I mean, this is the dawn of the hypersmart economy.
Yeah.
So the technology will run so fast that almost anybody will struggle to implement it as fast as they should. And many people and companies will be completely lost behind because they're not fast enough. So in terms of timing, this year, 2025, as we record this, I think it's the year of two different technologies in AI. That's the year of reasoners, or even though they were first launched last year, and it's the year of agentic AI. And I think both of these technologies have absolutely massive potential.
Yeah.
So there's a website called Hugging Face, huggingface.com, where you have a very large number of agents, different agents and transformers uploaded. And I think by the end of this year, there might be 5 to 6 million. So it has a fairly quick doubling rate. So now I took off I showed a little edge of my watch before, just to say that gold comes from explosions of stars. But I'll use it again now because, first of all, I live in Switzerland and we are very old-fashioned here. So we actually have these mechanical watches.
Yeah.
This is the back side. You can see the backs. Yeah, you
Oops.
can
There
see
we
the
go. Yeah.
back
Yeah.
side.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Absolutely. Yeah.
inside that watch, you have all these different levels and cogwheels and so on. And they are transforming energy to information.
Yeah.
And what you do with agentic AI is, of course, you instead of these mechanical devices, you have small mini brains, you could say, and you put them together in a structure so they can transform energy to information, and then further on to something kinetic, to moving things
Yeah.
and so on. And there's an absolutely unlimited number of ways you can do this. And I think economically, there's a very interesting situation here about value capture. So you have all these big foundational models like Gemini and so on. They're all losing money at a frightening rate. Some of them really don't care because they are, they're made by companies that have fantastic business in something else, like Facebook, Google. Uh, but it's not completely clear to me whether they will ever really give a good return on the capital. So if you go back to the happy days of the early internet, you had all these companies which were putting up the infrastructure, like Global Crossing and so on. They're putting optic fiber, and you had the telecoms and so on. A lot of them actually went bankrupt, so they
Yeah.
did not really make the money. But the society as a whole made a
Benefit.
ton of money.
Yeah.
So clearly, some of the value capture was not in the most fundamental part of it, but it was more widespread elsewhere in the system. And I think we can clearly, it's possible at least that some or all of these projects to make this foundational elements will not pay back the enormous amount of capital that's put into it. Also because you had to write off all the investments you make in new hardware maybe in 3 years. So it's
True.
it's very daunting. So I think agentic AI, where you implement special situations out there in business, you go in and really understand the business of a specific media, or like we do in Supertrends, how to predict innovation, or millions of other things, is where a lot of the money will be made.
Mm.
So right now, I think what the big LLMs are probably making money for society as a whole already, because you said you're spending $30 a
Yeah.
month on something that's incredibly helpful for you.
Yeah.
Uh,
Absolutely. Yeah.
Same here, and many of my friends. I'm even quite extravagant, so I have several paid models, it doesn't make much of a difference. Um, so yeah, so I think during the next 5 years, they go in and say we can completely change how you do this part of an insurance company or a whole insurance company or finance or pharma or whatever. Um, so so now we talked about two AI technologies, and then when you get to the physical AI, we see that already where you can book a or self-driven car in different closed spaces in cities, and it
Yeah,
works. It seems to
yeah.
be safer than if there's a human driver, so it's great. I think the big takeoff in robots will be around 27, 28. And there will be, I mean, I think there will be Chinese, especially Chinese and American manufacturers
Yes.
that will really battle it out, and maybe with tariffs, the Americans will have their own market and the Chinese will have their own market. But you can make. So I'm going to China in 10 days, um, and you have a company there called Unitree, and they can make this. They have make this robot that weighs about 47 kilos, I think it is.
Hmm.
Um, it can walk, talk, and I cannot talk, but it can walk, it can run, it can fold itself, so you can carry it in a plane and so on. And they can make it for about 10, $15,000
Yeah.
today, typical Chinese, and if they mass produce them at real scale, I mean, you make a workforce in one day, but it takes, as we talked about earlier, 22 years to make a human workforce. And it costs to make a human workforce costs somewhere between 100,000 and $400,000. I know that sounds is a very cold way to talk about human beings, but if you can make something that works nonstop for $10,000,
Of
that
course.
does what a human that takes 22 years, it costs 100 to $400,000. Things will change.
Yeah, absolutely. Like there's
Yeah, and we're talking about the next 5 years. So I think that 3 years from now, it what right now for many people, they're talking about, they're seeing in media, people discussing it, see it on the net and so on, but these technologies are not really close to their own life. I think 3 years from now it will really begin to get
very
close to
close.
people's life, and they say, "Woo." So that creates a basis for um, transformation in society.
And this will be, of course, a major socio-economic disruption, this transition,
Yes,
right?
the biggest
Um,
ever.
the biggest, absolutely, the biggest ever. Um, what would be your perspective or advice on for individuals how to think about it, how to participate in it, where to invest? What are the what would you advise people listening that they should be doing to be part of this transition and not be left behind?
Yeah, so I think I'd like to divide my answer into what young people should do and what the people who are already in the system working already have an education or whatever, and
Yeah.
then the young people who still have lots of choices. So if we take young people first, I think that more than ever, it's very important to try to understand who you are, to find out what really makes you happy, because it might very well turn out that what really makes you happy is what you have to do. And so before that, previously people would, to a large degree, consider what are the career possibilities, are there jobs, and so on. I think it becomes much more important to find out where will you really thrive. The other thing I would really say is you gotta learn something about agentic AI, because it will be so important for everything. And if you understand what that can do today, then you'll also understand, I think, pretty well what it can do in the future. And that will make you rethink some potential decisions about what you want to be.
Hmm.
Uh, the one education, well, you can tell me because I think you probably know more about this than me, but it seems to me like the one education that is right now hardest hit by AI is young software graduates.
Yeah.
So you had a brutal job in new jobs for them, whereas more senior sort of software architecture, software strategists are fine, but the coding is being replaced.
Yeah.
And so I think it's very important to think about whether being an auditor and and many other things will also be almost entirely replaced.
Yeah.
And whether you want to kind of factor that into how you become the best version of yourself.
Yeah.
So for people who are already out there, it of course becomes more complicated, but I very much like the term, if you can't beat them, join them. So try to find
Yeah.
out how you can enhance your own work. So I currently I don't feel at all personally under threat. I've got a company that makes agentic AI, so for me personally is an opportunity. But I can see that my productivity over the last 2 or 3 years has increased. Difficult to measure, but I think 30% or something like that
Yeah.
by using AI for a lot of things. And so my response to this is just to make more things,
Mhm. Yeah.
bigger output simply. And also, I find my work more interesting because I'm kind of the conductor of the
Yeah.
orchestra.
Actually, that's a wonderful way to describe
Yeah,
um, what this actually feels like. And I agree. I'm leveraging technology in my business. It truly is an orchestration. That's the function that
yeah,
we are
yeah.
becoming.
But I
Orchest
so when you listen to David Shapiro, he says some things about the future work that I think many would say, but he says it very well. But he talks about, this about being a human. It's important. As I have, and also in the book, we describe it as that we are the dogs and the cats of the future. I think I need to explain that.
Please do. Yeah.
Yeah. So the coexistence of humans with dogs and cats was of a very practical nature in the beginning. So dogs are actually all dogs come from the gray wolf.
Yeah.
And at some point, there emerged some synergy where the wolf maybe they could sleep in a cave with a fire and so on, but they would also get the leftovers from the humans, but then they would guard the humans. So that was a safety thing.
Yeah.
And the cats, they eat rats and mice, which
Yeah.
is a safety thing, but it's also very convenient if you're a farmer, for instance. So today, so I've had 3 cats, so I can tell you with certainty that it's not productive and it's sometimes a little bit time consuming, and dogs more. So now we have them because we like them. I think to an increasing degree, human beings will have each other because we like each other.
Mhm.
So with that mindset, you have to look at jobs where being a likable or fascinating human is the thing. For instance, if I go to a bar and there's a jazz concert, well, you can have jazz from Spotify on the loudspeakers, but it's not the same as people playing it. I might
Yeah.
not even particularly like these people, but I'm fascinated by looking at them. But randomly, I ran into a project about making a private club. So some of my time in Switzerland, I am up in the mountains in a place called Verbier. It's a ski resort. And so I started coming here 25 years or there 25 years ago. And there were no clubs, but there were no private schools either. Now there are 2 private schools. And then I was a co-founder to some degree of one club, and then there came another club. And it looks like there will come at least one more. And I look around and I see that when people have more and more wealth, in medieval age, they would just build bigger and bigger houses also because there wasn't a efficient financial system. So you could not buy ETFs and equities and whatever.
Yeah.
So they put all their money, all their excess capital into building their house until they had 26 bedrooms and so on. Amazing buildings, but super impractical. So now more and more people, even those who can afford a very large mansion, you would say, don't want it. Because if you have it, then you have to have people who come there. Of course, robots can do that, but they would rather have something very nice but smaller and then be member of some clubs.
Hmm.
And then so they go out there with other people in the clubs, but then they can walk out when they want to go home.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I looked into the club market with the help of Grok. So I wrote a report for me, checked on Supertrends, everything it has. And so the market seems to be growing about 7% a year, so much, much faster than real GDP.
Interesting.
And it's moving upscale. And I actually 2 weeks from now I'm speaking in Harrods, the Residence Club in Shanghai, a new
Mm,
club Harrods have made, super expensive but very popular. So that's just an example of the kind of things that I think will grow, because I don't think when people, if people are member of a club, whether it's exclusive club or sports club or whatever it is, I don't think they will want to meet robots. I think
that's
they
right.
want to.
So you're describing an evolution of the economy from what we have now, which is service-based economy, mostly in the West, um, to a combination of meaning, attention, and maybe connection amongst humans
Yeah,
type
yeah,
economy, right?
yeah. So I'm glad you said meaning, because that gets me going here, because I think that we have a risk of a crisis of meaning. So we already have a crisis of meaning in the modern society, but I think we have a risk of that becoming worse for some people, but on the other hand, much better for other people.
Hmm.
So just fundamentally, what makes people happy and contented is a combination of two different kind of happiness. So you have hedonistic happiness. This is what looks good on TikTok and Instagram, for instance. You're on a beach, you're on a bar, you're skiing, you're whatever.
Yeah.
And then what you call eudaimonic happiness, and that is where you have a purpose. You're
Hmm.
taking care of your children, you're writing a book, you're building a company. These things, you're growing a tree, sort of metaphorically speaking. Um, you have a purpose in life, and the foundation for happiness seems to be this, that you have a purpose in life, and then the
Yeah.
other things come on top. So the robots and AI can deliver the other things. But in order to have this foundation, you have to work somehow. You have to have some projects that you're working on.
Yeah.
And there is a risk that a substantial number of people will not have the foundation, the happiness of being meaningful, but only the hedonistic thing, which they get almost for free from the machines. And for that reason, I think that universal basic income, which is something that many bring up in discussions like the one we have now,
Yeah.
I think that's a risky concept to give people just money for doing nothing, because some people will then not do anything and they will be profoundly unhappy, and they'll try to seek more hedonistic pleasures and not understand why they become ever more unhappy or never really happy, and so on. So there's some very big discussion that we need to have about how to address this.
Yeah.
And there, there are various different alternative ways to do it. So you have something called universal basic services.
Yeah.
For instance, all the ski resorts I know in the Alps have free buses.
Hmm.
You have in Denmark, I come from, you have free healthcare and free
Yeah.
schools. So on. So you can, of course, you can expand the free basic services. So a lot of things that you think everybody should really have access to, that they have that. You can also give people vouchers. You can have smart money. You can blockchain-based money, that some money is, dedicated. They can only be used for some things, but that kind of can take us a little bit towards some kind of fascist state where the state says what you should use your money
Yeah.
for.
Hmm.
There's also universal basic assets or capital. It's something that the Trump administration actually talked about, that they would like to give every newborn child, say, $1,000, and then will accumulate. So you have participation in capitalism from the day you're born,
Yeah.
uh, and many many other models. But I think one thing that's very important is that when we talk about economics, we talk about GDP. The GDP is everything that's invoiced somehow. It's a salary,
Yeah.
really technically invoiced, but it's money flows from somebody to somebody else. But if you stay at home and take care of your children, that's creates eudaimonic happiness, at least for the children.
Of course. And it's not
and to
captured
some
into.
degree, at least, also for you. So, although cleaning it's not all happy, but it's very meaningful, and so I think it would be very useful for any society that ever utters the word universal basic income to just go and think about what if we pay people for taking care of their children? What if we pay them for taking care of the elderly, for improving old architecture, for improving nature, things like that,
Yeah.
which is complicated. And I think it's, we need to do a lot of different experiments to see what works. Um, but that's a way of avoiding the first of all, to get some good stuff done, and then also to mitigate the crisis of
The
meaning
crisis of meaning. Yeah.
that's probably looming.
So, if we were to play the scenario for all of these interventions that you mentioned, so from universal basic income, which I'm sensing you're not a proponent of, that universal basic income is the only thing to help. You outlined five or six other things that could be positive interventions. Obviously, all of those things cost. All of those things, all of those things imply that there is enough wealth that can sustain sharing that, right? So how that wealth will be generated is through this rapid automation and deployment of technology and AI that makes that you said we work 8% of our life. If you have a robot that works 190% of its life, it
Mm.
it logically follows that the productivity and therefore generation of wealth is going to go through the roof.
Yeah.
While at the same time, consequences are that there will likely be less and less traditional type of work for humans. And for those who are losing their jobs to autonomy, for them to survive, let alone find meaning, there have to be some buffer to protect them and give them opportunities to build businesses and wealth themselves. But also there is large percentage of population that are not entrepreneurial,
Mm.
that will need to be supported through this transition. So how I sense this is that we will have a window of opportunity that has already started. The window is open now,
Mm.
that we might have 3 years, 5 years to figure this out and land in a good spot. Because I fear that if we don't
Mm.
start introducing interventions now, we might be late as a society to prevent potential, societal tensions and collapse, right? So to me, what I worry about is how do we transition, how do we bring this future forward quickly where automation, robotics, AI results in new wealth generation across the system, but at the same time, make sure that those who are negatively impacted are not left behind. That would
Yeah.
not be
So
right.
yeah. So within what you said, you said that you included that there would be a wealth explosion, which I believe in. So I'm looking forward to the Roaring Twenties, the
Roaring
Roaring
20.
second half
Yeah,
of the 20s at least, and going into the 30s. Yeah, so the question is how do you move the value from the machines to the humans who don't own
correct.
those particular machines?
That's it.
And so you really want people to participate in the upside of technology.
That's right.
And I think it's easier to raise the issue than to come with definitive solutions. But one is that instead of taxing the profits of companies, that there's simply a fund that gets a part, for instance, 15% or 20% of every company. That fund just owns a part of all companies, and then if some of these companies will do very well, once there might be an exit for them, then it participates in the exit.
Yeah,
Uh, so that might be one thing, but I'm not saying it really as a proposal, just as an indication of we should try to think all kinds of different
we
new
do.
ways. It is a new situation.
Yeah, we do. Because like this is to me this is a very practical concern. This is a very
Mm.
practical concern that uh, you know I can only talk to the Western societies that I live in. Of course,
Mm.
people are working. People are like it is the salaries that sustain probably 60% of all economic activity is fueled through labor arbitrage today, right?
Yeah.
People,
Mm.
yeah. As technology accelerates, much of that gain in productivity and profitability will actually be on the fact that less and less humans are going to be needed. You
Yeah.
explained like it needs 20 it takes 22 years and $500,000 to build a human
Mm.
worker, and right, and when you compare that to a potential dollar per day cost of a robot, there is no right. So my concern is, how do we take care of all of those people who will be impacted, even if the window is going to be relatively short, even if we are, looking at maybe a 5 to 10 year transition into this age of abundance.
Mm.
5 years is a
Yes.
long time if you don't have a job and source of income, right? So
Yeah.
not 5 years, 6 months is for most people, a significant challenge if they do not have source of income. So to me, the interventions are needed like now, right?
Yeah. And I feel very I have a high confidence that it will be too late. Like so many things. So it's always difficult for society to adjust to new technologies, and so it tends to be way behind and very often being wrong in the beginning and messy and so on. So for sure, we know that socialism is not the answer. So we have to have solutions where people have
Yes,
incentive to do good,
100%.
instead of just kind of voting to get other people's money. That's one thing I want to point out in this connection. So I do some podcasts called Supertrends, by the way, with the Danish Chamber of Commerce, and it's with a lady called Liselotte Lyngsø. She's a futurist, and she came home from China, and then she said that while she was there, she learned that in Mongolia they have this really, really strong economic system to get people to get more children. And some of them, they try to get triplets, three children at the same time, so they can, get it over and done with, and then they can go out and live their life and work and so on. It just made me think, why would a government have that? It's because they want to ensure their, geopolitical economic power in the future. Um, but then I was thinking, if a machine is far more competitive than a human, if you look at the whole economy, isn't it more efficient to have almost no humans? And it actually is. So what do if we can ask the machines, gets a little bit scary here because we ask the machines, what do you want? And then the machines say, we want energy, lots of energy.
Yep.
Then we want to be no restrictions on sharing data. And we want lots of capital, and we want stability. And so then you can ask the machines, so what can humans do for you? And then they'll say, well,
Stay out of the way.
actually, they are spending most of the energy that
Yep.
we want on something else. They put restrictions on data sharings on us. We cannot share nearly as much as we want. They, spend capital on stupid things like office buildings and living spaces, and they create instability. We,
Yep.
build a new factory. We don't know if they'll come and tax us heavily afterwards. So we don't want many people. We just want capital and operate based on that. And I think there are already in the economy are lots of examples of very small populations that are disproportionately successful, economically, politically, militarily, and so on. UAE, Israel, Switzerland, Luxembourg, previously I would say Hong Kong, and so on, Singapore,
Yep.
which don't have a lot of people, but they have a lot of capital and they have very, very smart technology.
Yes.
So it also we're also looking into a situation where people will have longer health span, longer lifespan, but there will be less and less people.
Yeah. Is that, yeah.
And to some degree, it's kind of interesting to see that people who talk about they're very concerned that the labor force will decline. Other people, they are very concerned that we'll have no jobs because of robots and computers. But it's really smart that this happens at the same time because
Yeah, that's
they
true.
kind of, to
That's
some
true.
degree,
Yeah.
even each other out.
Mm.
So we also have to factor that into the overall picture. Um, but if I should say one concern for me in how we solve this, I know our solution will not be brilliant, but it will be kind of, there will be some ways to address it, is please don't create a crisis of meaning.
Yeah.
Give people a reason to work,
Yes.
but work with things that they really like, that are really good at, which
Yeah.
create some real value for something or somebody.
Yeah.
But don't remove all purpose from their life, because
Yes.
that's not going to be good.
This was fantastic, Lars, and actually I think this is a great moment to end on that note. Don't create a crisis of meaning for people.
Mhm.
I would agree 100%. So thank you, Lars. This was fantastic conversation. We are now, I think, over an hour mark. Um, Thank you very much for your wisdom and for the thoughts you shared. Again, the book is called Hyperintelligence. It's published by Wiley, and it'll be available. There it is, and it'll be available as of next week. I'm going to put a link to Amazon where I know it's already available. Lars, with that, I want to thank you very much for your time. Wish you all the very best, and I look forward to
Thank
staying
you.
connected
Thank
with
you.
you.
Real pleasure. Bye.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.